I went from failing my first semester of university to now working in Paris as a cancer researcher. And every time I had to improve and push myself, I hated it every single time. Hi, my name is Matt, and I'm a recent biotechnology graduate and now working as a researcher in Paris for a year. This is a channel where I'm going to just try and explain my thoughts on certain topics. And this video, I really wanted to focus on this idea of I hate improving. And what I sort of mean by that generally is more about the discomfort and the pain that comes with pushing yourself and moving out of a comfort zone. A bit about my experience throughout different parts of my journey, sort of the ways that the reality was different to my expectations of how I would deal with that sort of stress or discomfort. To cut a long story short, I essentially went from a failing GPA. So in Australia, that's lower than 4 out of 7. So I started at a failing GPA in university, and I was just playing video games. I was 17 at the time, just rotting away. But at some point I decided to start improving, to maybe try a bit harder and maybe try and get my grades up and be a more responsible person in terms of my future. What was very interesting at this time is that at the moment I decided to lock in and start focusing, I actually knew that it was going to be difficult. It would be very weird of me to think that it's not going to be difficult, given that not only was I behind in my studies, that also I would need to build all the skills up to become the type of person who gets much higher grades. In terms of the first part of this journey, it was really about putting in more effort, and I knew it was going to be uncomfortable, and I think the reality to my expectations were met pretty fairly, because I would be quite naive to think that it was going to be easy. And I guess when the discomfort came, when I had to push myself, when I had to, quit games, try and study more, work on my study systems, try and be a bit more responsible, be more physical, do exercise, things like that. Yeah, the sort of discomfort was very equal to what I was expecting. However, at around the second last and last year of my university degree, what I realized was that I sort of also had this expectation, you could say, that the discomfort would get easier as I got better. So obviously, as my grades went up and I became better at studying, more opportunities would be open, and therefore I would be able to, it would be easier, I thought, to push myself and to go into more discomfort and more areas of my life which would lead to more growth. But what actually happened is I sort of realized that for me personally, I really, really, really hate pushing myself. And this sort of idea, I think, is independent of the idea that we need to put ourselves in stressful situations to push ourselves and to grow. So there's this idea in psychology of the growth zone, where we have I'll show the picture up on the screen. We have the comfort zone, then the fear zone, and after the fear zone we reach the growth zone, which is, I guess, a state of stress where our psyche, or just us as a person, start to improve and go into new territory and build new skills and overall improve as a person. And this idea, I think, is just undeniable, right? Of course, in order to improve, you're going to have to put yourself out of what you're comfortable doing, out of what you always do, to build new skills and to become better. But what I noticed for me personally, and I actually haven't seen many people talk about this online, is that when you go from that comfort to the growth zone, obviously there's stress. It's going to be stressful, it's going to be scary, you have to go through the fear. But for me personally, every time I did it, from the beginning, I always felt an extremely high amount of hate. And I like using that word because essentially, if I broke it down, it was just negative energy, just negativity. Oh, I don't want to do this. I would rather go back to playing video games when I was running away. And this really core change in my mindset, where I realized that I actually need to learn to love to hate this discomfort and this hatred I had towards improvement in order to continue improving. Because what actually happened is, after that third year and fourth year, so I stayed in uni, I decided to try go to France. So I kept trying to take bigger, at the start, my, I guess, growth zone was, can I actually study a bit more and not play games all day? And as I kept improving, okay, now I'm at a point where I can study pretty well. Can I become more efficient? Can I use that free time too? I did some things like coaching my little brother's basketball team, or volunteering with the uni clubs, and building a mentoring project at the university. As things got more difficult, actually the pain or the stress was the same. It's just I did things that were more or less about me and more about the community. And now what I'm doing is I decided to go to France to work as a researcher here while I decide if I want to do a PhD. And this I've noticed is like, okay, like this was the next step from my previous growth, and it was the same. I still didn't want to do it. You know, when I started thinking about this idea, I didn't want to do it. I would rather just stay in my hometown, stay in Brisbane. But I decided, like, look, you know, I need to learn to love, to hate this feeling of discomfort, this feeling of stress, in order to lead to growth. Because every single time I've done it, it's led to more growth. And I don't see myself stopping. So far this year, I've started to, I hope, push myself more, and I've started this YouTube channel, and there's some other projects that I'm trying on the side. And I guess coming to France was a really big thing for me, moving away from home, living alone. All these things for me are just evidence that putting myself in these stressful situations is what is necessary to improve, and that's what I want. But independent of that, I've noticed that for me personally, I always feel a really high amount of stress and negativity towards it. And I don't actually know if this is normal or if this is common for everyone who might be interested in, you know, pushing themselves and trying to improve as a person. Because it really feels, I don't use hate lightly. I genuinely hate it, and I would rather not do it. For example, starting this YouTube, I would rather not do it. I have plenty of other things I could do that are more comfortable, or things that I used to do. So it's really interesting to me that I can have both of these at the same time. It can be true that to improve, you need to push yourself into that growth zone. And also, for me personally, I can actually really hate it. I can really dislike it, but still do it anyway. Because the alternative is, I don't do it, and I just stay in the same place. And I think that's probably going to have more pain in the long run than if I just suck it up and absorb the stress up front. And this is just a reflection of where I am right now. Technically, I've only been doing this improvement thing, whatever that's called, since that start of my, I think, second year of university. And so maybe it gets easier later on, but I'm starting to lean towards this new idea that I've tried to present here, which is that these things can be independent. It can be true that you need to put yourself in stressful situations to improve, and also that stress could be really like painful or really aggressive towards your mental health or towards just the way you feel. And that can be okay. It can be okay to have those two things, as long as those things you're doing to push yourself actually move you towards a bigger goal. So you're not just doing it for the sake of improving. You have a reason to do it. For example, when I'm doing my cancer research here, I'm actually very interested in that work. So pushing myself to do a presentation in a second language, I presented in French, which I would have not done that a year ago. But this year, it just made sense to me. Yeah, I don't want to do it. I'll probably hate doing it, but I need to do it anyway. And presenting in a second language just to push that skill and develop and build confidence. That was an example of where I just decided to just accept all the stress from that and just do it anyway, because I know in the end it's going to lead to improvement, as it has for the past 3 years. And now I'm more prepared to do something again whenever the next presentation comes up or whatever opportunity comes up. And I can see how that fits into the goal of me wanting to learn a second language, to speak French, and also towards contributing to this cancer research field as a whole. So when things align really well, and the only thing I have to do is just take the stress and, I guess, absorb it and reuse it in a positive way, in a net positive way to grow, I think that is just a very interesting idea that, I hope might resonate with you, or maybe it might inspire you to try and do something that might feel really discomforting for you, but you know in the back of your mind it will lead to improvement, because there's no way it can't. Even if it fails, it will lead to some improvement. And I just think that's probably what it's all about when we are trying to better ourselves.